shaping policy, advancing development.
Now, for several years, the Sri Lankan economy has been struggling with sluggish growth. In 2020, inflation peaked, reaching nearly 70%. Now, the Asian Development Bank is partnering with the country with a 5-year strategic plan. What will it do for the country? The aim, by the way, is to help Sri Lanka achieve economic recovery, sustainable economic recovery. Let's look at the challenges and the road to achieving sustainable economic recovery for Sri Lanka. Joining virtually this morning, Julius Afolabi, who is a premium business coach and also a value improvement strategist and author, to talk about this with us this morning. Good morning, Afolabi.
Good morning to you, and I hope it's a fresh and wonderful morning to you out there too.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for joining us. Well, the morning looks bright, and we hope for very many good things this morning. And we thank you for joining us. Now, let's talk about the Sri Lankan economy. I did mention in the introduction that for several years, the country was battling sluggish growth and also had a very high inflation rate in 2022 that almost reached 70%, which is really, really high for any country to have. Let's look at the situations that even brought Sri Lanka to that level.
Well, the Sri Lankan experience is that which is, you say, is similar to the African Rwanda, right? In one way or the other. Right, for over close to 2 decades, Sri Lanka has been battling with growth, and which is, I would say that is capitally resident on leadership priorities and proactive, I would like to say reactive governance, right? That's what really triggered that. And you, like you said, the inflation rate has been very hyper, up to 70%. In fact, it got to a point where food inflation was about 95, 97%. And that was what erupted the reactions from the entire community. So it became, life was on a thin thread. And that was what triggered the almost reaction, the protest, and so many other reactions that worsened the entire situation. It's not a situation that any group of people will want to really experience, despite the fact that they are a small geographical area with less than 25 million in population that shouldn't have such issues. It's so surprising that sometimes leadership is not really because you have density of people. It's just about leadership will and ability to maximize the resources that you have, and also the ability to clean up the society. Like I said, it's about proactive governance, right? And not reactive governance and leadership priority. That's exactly. And the ability to be able to maximize the resources that are available to you and are accessible to you. That leadership vision to be able to see what is in your environment and what is around your environment. Like, you know, they are all also very dependent on their tourist attraction around their area, but their policy is also defective in maximizing that resource, right? If a country like Sri Lanka has a long-term vision, right, with good policies in place and leadership will, what happened in Sri Lanka that erupted their inflation would have been avoided, totally avoided, with good policy implementation, initiation and implementation, most importantly, and then a clean people orientation. And one specific thing about Sri Lanka that should prevent such an occurrence is the fact that they have a very highly skilled labor. But then because of the upsurge in the insecurities and the leadership sluggishness and inability to harness the resources within them, there's been a lot of human capital flight, just like it happens in Nigeria, highly skilled, a little bit blessed with resources, but the inability of leadership to be able to manage its resources and take advantage of what is around it in order to what influence her growth. So it's really, really something that calls for an intervention. So, and I believe that the present intervention they are getting is going to go a long way to bring them back up speed. As we have seen, there has been some element of growth, and we hope to see more of that. Thank you.
Okay, before we get back to some of the issues that you've talked about, which is the mainstay of the Sri Lankan economy, which used to be tourism, and then some of its internal policies working against the growth of its mainstay. Let's look at governance issues. Now, they also had a foreign reserve depletion and a high external debt burden, which were some of the issues that plagued the country before now. Looking at the high external debt burden that they had, and also foreign reserve depletion, what can you say about the governance of Sri Lanka before this time?
Okay, it's been the only thing that makes debt a burden is its use, the use to which the debts are put. The reason for attracting or soliciting for the debt, right? The reason for soliciting for the debt is important. The use to which the debt is going to be put is equally very, very important. The mismanagement of debt is what crystallizes into bad debt, right? A debt does not just go bad, right? It becomes doubtful in the process of its management, right? And it becomes a risk. When a debt ceases to accomplish the purpose for which it has been requested, then it moves, its life becomes doubtful. It becomes a risk that the crystal effect will go beyond the reason why you even went for it. And now looking at in those situations, you find out that when when you acquire debt and it is mismanaged, you would discover that it would affect the economy adversely. And when it affects the economy adversely, the economy will not be attractive to foreign development investment. At a point in time, Sri Lanka's foreign development investment was at 1% of its GDP. Now, if you attract debt and you cannot attract foreign investors, that you cannot provide a conducive environment that will leverage the debt you have acquired and create a synergy to improve on the resources that you have, it will be practically difficult for you to become attractive to what foreign development investment. And no matter how you do it, like one of the former presidential aspirants of Nigeria will say, you don't pay for the debt of a drunkard while he's still at the bar, right? If he is not gotten off the bar, of course, you're paying the debt, you are only improving its wastefulness. So that's exactly the reason that the foreign development has been very low and the economy has remained unattractive. So acquiring debt is not a bad idea. The use to which debt is put, the reason for the debt, and the management of the debt. Most of the time, there is always a gap between theory and practice. You find well-curated plans on paper, but you find that implementation is bankrupt. Where that gap exists, of course, in that gap is enshrined quite a number of what? Imbalance that trickles down into the economic, household, private sector, and the public sector as well. So without a national vision where the debts that are being acquired is pumped into, that involves the people's needs and private sector suitable infrastructure, it's impossible for you to grow your GDP. So, and when that happens, definitely you find out that even the investors that you have on ground will close shop and migrate to other environments where they have infrastructural cooperation and policy alignment, right? Most importantly, they have justification for their stay. So that's one of the capital effects of their the bankruptcy of their debt management. At the same time, the unattractiveness of foreign development investment in Sri Lanka.
Looking at the partnership between AFDB, having talked about the challenges that the Sri Lankan economy has been challenged with over the years. Now, one of the things that the strategy plans to accomplish is to achieve macroeconomic stability and growth for the Sri Lankan economy. What would that do for Sri Lanka, and what do you think is going to happen in the course of achieving that?
Yes, the first thing that is important to understand about this intervention is that it's a solution-oriented initiative to bring Sri Lanka out of the wood. Now, the involvement of the Asian Development Bank and the current country partnership strategy is that it is specialized and customized. Like what is lovely about influencing the macro dynamics is the fact that they have an understanding that there is need for, economic resilience, right? First, and then there is also a need for what some basic financial competence required, which is leveraged on specific skills. Now there's a move towards creating infrastructure. They're looking at basically focusing on the environment, looking at gender equality, and then transformation, which has to do with infrastructures like building new seaports and the likes. Those are peculiar investments or interventions that would enable the economy to stabilize. So when you get the economy stable, then it begins to sit on a foundation that can bring growth. So you would notice that in the last 1 or 2 years in Sri Lanka, the little interventions, the 100 million injection in making funds available, making credit more accessible, and managing, consumer-based projects has really helped in lowering the poverty standard, the poverty level, at the same time, the economic activities, right? Making credit accessible, not just creating knowledge-driven empowerment. There has been a lot of knowledge-driven empowerment, right? Skilled intervention, first of all. That's why it's specialized and customized, in the sense that the intervention is not just about government priorities. It involves both the private sector. They want to leverage the private sector as well as have consultations, right? Have consultations at both the grassroots level, at the same time, the private sector level, so that they can have what we call the PPP. I think Nigeria once did that, the public-private sector participation partnership, right? That's this fora is going to engineer a lot of internal cohesion that is going to improve the efficiency of service and access to resources that can revamp the economy. It's a gradual and a steady growth initiative, right? So the fact that it is customized and it is specific to certain needs in alignment with what the government priorities. Now there's a high level of awareness that we need to do something. You know, the moment you know you have a problem and you need to do something and you're willing to do that particular thing, a high level of cooperation comes into play. Now, when you have good strategic support, it becomes easy to grow. Now, if you have to affect your macro dynamics in terms of your gross domestic product, your employment rates, the inflation, and all the metrics, right? It starts from at the macro level, which is basically the subsistence and the availability of funds. There's the injection of funds for small businesses, and there is more participation in skill-driven activities. Like there's going to be a lot of IT restructuring, and they are also helping in policy formulation. One of the catastrophe of Sri Lanka is in the policy somersaults. Now, the policy somersaults was responsible for the things that transpired and the protest, the reaction that came from the people because of the imbalance in the policies and the activities, the implementation of the policies as well, vis-a-vis what their resources were, right? So the fact that the intervention is going to step into first policy formulation and is going to address, is going to involve infrastructural development, which has to do with things that will encourage in beyond border trading and partnership, like the seaports and the logistics and transportation. That to a large extent is going to influence what their macro metrics. So that's what I think is going to do. And what will be the resultant effect of this? There will be much more stability. The moment people can have the basic things they need to continue to live, right? There is room for what? For development. And the need for it is also going to create a long-term vision, right? For Sri Lanka. If everybody is on the same page, giving this country intervention, right? Giving the CPS it's going to give Sri Lanka a path, a growth path. And where that happens, then you find out that it is not limited to only a tenure of government, but it is a continuity growing plan, right? That even if it is not achieved within a particular tenure, it can continue, right? So if that is done, definitely we are going to see much a better Sri Lanka in few years to come. Now, we're looking forward to what if 2022 and 2023 has experienced this kind of growth, has brought down their inflation. If you look at it, the inflation rate has really come down. And there's a measure of what, a level of rest, right? So if we are seeing improvement in the interventions of the African Development Bank, now we expect that we're going to leverage on this. And because they are involving the private sector, I believe that the involvement of the private sector in alignment with stakeholders consultation is going to help the strategy to really flourish. And that will mean a lot for Sri Lanka. So I see a great future ahead of Sri Lanka given this intervention. And because the capacity of the Asian Development Bank is large in terms of
we have a connection issue there. We hope it gets resolved quickly and then we can continue our conversation. But looking further into what the Asian Development Bank is doing with Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka as a country already has the challenge of fiscal deficit. And good to know that Julius Afolabi, business coach, talking with us this morning, is back and we can continue the conversation. Now, having looked at what the step towards achieving macroeconomic stability and growth will be and what the end result would look like, let's also take a look at some of the macroeconomic issues that Sri Lanka has had over the years. Now, they have the challenge of fiscal deficit and as well as trade deficits, more imports than exports. Now, looking at building the economy away from tourism, they have an agricultural sector that is strong, contributing between 7 to 8% of the country's GDP and also employing a workforce of between 27 to 30% of its population. But it is challenged with low productivity as most of those in the agricultural sector are still smallholder farmers. What should be the direction of the ADB in addressing this issue and creating more than just one stay for the economy?
Of course, the moment there is diversity is easy with infrastructural availability, right? Now, the reason why the employment rate, regardless of the high skilled, human capital in Sri Lanka, there has been a heavy migration. In fact, statistics shows that the migration of skilled workers from Sri Lanka has been in the range of maybe hundreds of thousands, right? Between 100 and 300,000 over the years, right? That can also affect what the productivity level, right? When you have low. Now, apart from tourism, right, agriculture is one area from which many other areas can grow, can flourish from, because the produce and the produce from agriculture and the produce of agriculture can create other sources of income when they are processed. So the intervention now will be moved in the fiscal policies as a result of high taxes, right? The high taxes was what triggered the fiscal imbalance, and that will come from policy restructuring, right? Looking at the economy of the people and looking at how to drive what their taxation, right? That's critically important. So investment in infrastructure, first of all, in education, right? Not just education, but customized education in the area that are import alternatives, right? Import alternative areas, high level of importation. And because the operational model of the African Development Bank and the country partnership strategy is the fact that it's customized and it's specialized, right? There's a flexible approach to adapt whatever it is based on what the government priorities are and what the public and private consultations are, in consonance with whatever the growth dimensions are. It gives an opportunity for them to concentrate their intervention on these other areas. For instance, in agriculture, where there seems to be a high level of contribution, we expect that there will be a metamorphosis from small-scale farming into what mechanized farming, which can come from grassroots, right? Like back in Nigeria, we used to have agricultural extension services. Now, with the coupling those services, mere education, looking at how processes can be improved, planting and seedlings and refinement, increasing the value chain, right? In addition to what IT, information technology and AI, artificial intelligence, this can gradually skyrocket what the agriculture will do in Sri Lanka. It will metamorphose the rate at which agriculture is doing now, and it will move it. They will now become, when that grows, they will now become exportable agriculture, right? And that is what is going to reduce. That's why there's the need to identify what the category of importations are. When you identify what it is that we are spending our money on, then what do we have that can create alternative for what you spend our money on? Then we concentrate our intervention and education on those areas. And if they have been doing very well before, we'll provide incentives, which is a physical arrangement, right? That's a physical arrangement. We'll provide incentives in this area to allow people to come into that particular area. And knowing very well, if you look at the population strata of Sri Lanka as well, you'll find out that they are getting towards the aging population, right? So there's a need to invest in the youth and make the environment attractive so that we can have other people come into into Sri Lanka to do the same thing. There are people that will come into Sri Lanka to do agriculture because of the way agriculture is done, right? That's like now, instead of having to bring in expatriates, people are attracted by the model that is in existence in Sri Lanka because they want to practice that, which may not be available in their own place. At the same time, create incentives that encourage locals to be able to support these particular initiatives and drive them, right? The moment the locals drive them, right, there is less ethnic and regional conflicts, right? When that is properly settled by policy implementations and agreement and consultation, there will be no protest, there will be no social unrest. This will encourage unity and allow people to work together in cooperation, such that education becomes a unit of transformation. And as well, again, we also notice that there is a lot of gender imbalance, right? The women have not been really involved in high-skilled occupations and the rest of them. They have been more of domesticated and involved even in the agriculture. So if you're looking at the microcredits, like it happened for the Grameen Foundation, right? Now you can create, clusters, right? That these women will be organized into, and then educated, empowered, and encouraged, incentivized to be able to do better. As they grow very well, as they begin to grow, we begin to introduce AI and artificial intelligence and information technology in enhancing their production, processing, refinement in order to meet what global and international standards. Now, three things will happen. They will have products that can be exported. They will have skills that can be exported. They will now create an environment that will attract what? FDI. So these, if these measures are taken, I believe that we're going to see a better Sri Lanka.
All right, climate change is one factor that strongly impacts Sri Lanka, and the ADB will be focusing on initiatives that will help the country mitigate the challenges of climate change. And part of what it will do is to introduce climate-smart agricultural practices and also sustainable practices like help the country transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy. Can you speak to these areas and how you think is going to happen? What will be the end result from it all?
Now, it's good that they're going to introduce smart climate adaptable systems, right? Now, we already know that the prosperity and the flourishing of agriculture is dependent on climate. Now, introducing smart technology inclined climate initiatives is going to help to be able to boost agricultural production. If I get that your question clearly, how this is going to happen. Now, first of all, it's going to be skilled education and empowerment. That's going to trigger how to use that, how to use those smart devices. Because I know very well that they experience some measure of what do you call it now, weather events and water, like in their environment, which can distort the agriculture, right? Can you please come again with that question? I'm trying to balance what I got with what you said, please. Come again.
Agriculture is part
Yes.
of the plan or the strategy that the ADB has to help Sri Lanka handle some issues associated with climate change. Now, this will involve best practices for land use and also some other mechanism that it would need to adopt to be able to tackle the effect of climate change in agriculture sector. And even for the country, it's also targeting transitioning the country from fossil fuel to renewable energy in order to reduce the gas emissions.
Okay. Oh, right. Now I get it now. Now, the transitioning is one area that I know very well that is going to alleviate the distortions in Sri Lanka. Moving from fossil fuel to renewable energy is something that is attractive to almost every economy. Now, smart agriculture will boost productivity, right? Smart agriculture will boost productivity because you can have environmental climate detectors at the same time climate transformation strategies by understanding exactly there's prediction of what happens and there are prevention methods and how best to use the seasons in order to be able to achieve what the agricultural goals are. Now, because the Asian Development Bank is big on energy, I believe that they have the resourcefulness to be able to make this happen in Sri Lanka, especially with the concentration of what? IT. IT and agriculture is one of the major focus of the CPS, right? It's one of the major focus of the CPS. And understanding that climate plays a critical role, the conversion, like what happened sometime back, let me really bring this back home. There was this Songhai farm administration sometime back in my local environment here, where they had renewable energy in the sense that all everything that is used within the farm are transformed and converted into energy to provide both biogas, to provide light, and the rest of to provide light, even for renewable energy for that particular farm. So all the wastes were recycled, right? They had a system that recycled the entire waste within the farm to generate energy supply. So there was zero waste, right? Gas emission definitely is going to reduce, is going to affect or increase the climate impact and influence on agriculture. So in rechanneling this, creating gas emission substitutes, right? Through processing, basically, right? Through processing and trapping these effects is going to help them to be able to control emission of gas in the first place, at the same time, do agriculture beyond the way it has been done right now. So I believe that the introduction of artificial intelligence, ID, and the resourcefulness in energy that African development is known for, even though they are always on the big project side, right? I believe that it can be faced in Sri Lanka, and gradually this can be achieved.
Asian Development Bank and the African Development Bank. What are the lessons that the African Development Bank learned from the strategy that the ADB has employed in bailing out Sri Lanka from its economic challenges? There seems to be highlighting of unique challenges and priorities of the country and addressing it thus. What's to learn here?
Well, the lesson that African Development Bank can learn from the Asian Development Bank is, number one, like I mentioned, leadership priority, proactive governance, people need and private sector alliance, consultation forums. Those are one of the things that in the African setting are not properly harnessed and harmonized. See, economic reforms and initiatives in the African setting has mostly been theoretical, not practical, right, in implementation. And because there hasn't been a long-term vision for majority of the African countries, it has been difficult to be able to navigate and negotiate growth and development in the African space. So the Asians, they muscle their weight, they put in their weight into it, have consultations. They are not just they are not mono-dependent on what just leadership wants. The fact that the initiatives are flexible, they are specialized, and they are customized to every single situation, right? They look at the situation critically. Like the CPS now, there was a time they had this open forum where they invited both stakeholders, the private sector. It was an open forum, and people came and bare up their mind. They looked at the policies. It affected what they wanted to do initially, and they were implemented. People saw that their voices were heard. So there's the listening, the long-term vision, the listening, and the implementation, the sincerity of implementation, that of whatever it is that the leadership wants to carry out, that is suitable even for the people and the private sector. So the lesson to learn is what the definiteness of intervention, right? The definiteness of intervention in customizing its solution to the peculiarity of those environments. That's one thing that the Asian Development Bank has been very proactive and good about. If you look at the areas in which these interventions have happened, you will see the measure of growth that has happened. And because they are skilled and specialized in carrying out their initiatives, it goes a very long way. First of all, they arrest what the core issues are. They do not only listen to leadership, they go and listen to the people. They go and listen to the private sector and ensure that the solutions are customized. There's a one-page canvas that drives what is implemented. So, and most importantly, because they consider the environment, because they leverage the education, right? Like, for instance, they have concentration on STEM initiatives, which I think Nigeria too Nigeria and some other African countries are also taking into consideration and holding dear to their heart, because these are necessities and foundations for growth and development within a nation. They also look at security concerns, political unrest, economic stability. These are the basis on which the Asian development intervention crystallize on. So the lesson is the definite of intervention in customizing solution to the peculiarity of the concern. So which is a comprehensive solution-oriented initiative. So this is the core lesson for me, the collective, the collective agreement in solving a particular problem in a strategic way that includes policy formulation that can sustain the change, right? And creating orientation that manage. It's one thing to be able to implement a change. It's another thing to have the capacity, the human capital that can sustain the change. It's another thing to have the orientation of the people to buy into the change that is being initiated. So this is one of the areas in which the definiteness of the intervention of the Asian Development Bank has triumphed over the African Development Bank.
Shaping policy, advancing development.